Thank you very much, Megan. Let me see. Do I need to talk into this? Is that better? Yes. Well, thank you. I'm very honored to be here and to have such a nice crowd. Thanks for coming out on a cold evening, and it's good to see a lot of old friends that I haven't seen for a while, and it's very heartwarming for me. So what I wanted to talk about tonight, I've been in business since 1984. Before that, I worked for Herschel Shepherd, and I learned how to do historic restoration work working for Herschel. We restored the Florida Historic State Capitol. Herschel was project architect, and I was a project manager, and it was quite a thrill and a great project to be associated with. Herschel was always wonderful to work with, and he was a great architect, and he's been a mentor and good friend for a long time. So what I'd like to go over tonight would be some of the work that we've done here in St. Augustine. And so I don't have a lot of images of all of the projects, some of them more than others. But if you have any questions as we go along, I'm happy to stop and answer any questions you might have. So I don't have any, let me know if you have any questions about it. With that, I think I'd like to get started, and let's see if we can operate the equipment and maybe turn the lights. Larry's going to catch the lights here for us. So I started my practice in 1984. And actually, the first project I did in St. Augustine was restoration of the repair of the brick and the tuck pointing at the lighthouse. And that was in the late 1980s. And they had actually at the Lightkeeper's house. So the Lightkeeper's house had been restored, but the brick didn't turn out as well as they'd hoped. So we did a little small job out there. And then a year or two later, I got a call from Paige Edwards, who was the director of the Historical Society at the time. And Paige Herschel had recommended me to help restore the Segee Kirby Smith house. So, and they had a state grant, and so this was the Segee Kirby Smith house, I think in the late 1800s, before it was purchased and became a free public library building. So we did this in the early 1990s, and this was the outside of the building. We didn't change the building at all on the exterior. We restored the stucco. We repaired the dormers. The windows were all restored. The doors were restored. And then on the rear of the building, the storage building, the top image is I have a pointer here. This is the little storage building before we got started, and this was what we ended up with when we got finished. And actually, this project was completed by E.B. Mead and Son. Bob Mead was the general contractor, if any of you knew Bob or know Bob. So one of the things, these railings that were up here, so we had a state grant, and so they wanted the railings put back like they were before, which we did, and then we put like these booster rails on top of them. The roofing was not leaking, and we didn't have any, we used all of our money on the restoration work, so the roofing was slate roof at the time. It was left in place, and later I think it was replaced with a cement asbestos type of roofing. So this is the main reading room, and so the building had been used as a free public library, I think, since the late 1800s. And the St. Augustine Lighthouse, or St. Augustine Library, had moved out and built a new building on US 1. So this was the main reading room that they were using before we got started. You can see there was a plaster ornament up here on the ceiling. So we put that, we saved that, but we took out the ceilings and put new floor framing in to beef up the floor framing for the library loads. And this was the restored reading room. So the heart pine floor was sanded and refinished. We repaired the walls, we put new ceilings in, and we put new lighting that was more appropriate for the library at the time. This is the reading room looking to the south, or to the north, and so same thing. So here you can see where the ceiling has been taken out, but basically all of the character-defining features of the spaces were retained and restored and been in use ever since. Although at this point the building is 20, 30 years, or the restoration is 20-something years beyond, and it's ready to be painted and the windows repaired again and have some more work done on it, and air conditioning system upgraded. So when you go into the library, you come up an exterior stair and you come in this door that we added, and then this railing was encased in a wall when we got started. So we took the wall out and the railing was all finished and restored. And so this is, most of you probably haven't been to this level. This is the attic where they store their archive storage. And so the plaster walls that were up there were all broken and deteriorating and kind of falling off. So we took the plaster off and we just left it off, and for ventilation and also to expose the structure that was up there. So those are the heart pine studs in the attic area. This is the Tovar house that we worked on for the St. Augustine Historical Society. This would be the late 1800s for the Tovar house. So they had a state grant, and we did restoration work on the Tovar house. This was before we got started, after we got finished. So we really didn't change anything on the exterior. We restored the railings, the windows, the shutters, put new wood shingle roof on it, put new air conditioning systems in the building. We did a paint analysis on the interior, found very little bit of original paint fabric. And so one of the thoughts was, as we were doing it, Latitudes did the work, Conrad with Latitudes. And so we found this nice textured plaster when some of the loose paint was peeled off. So it was left to expose it as the building went on. So I think, so then we went from that. This is the Trinity Episcopal Church. So we've done several projects there, starting in the 1990s. The buildings, this masonry brick building has got stucco on the outside, has no control joints on it. So as it expands and contracts with the sun and the cool nights like tonight, it develops cracks over time. So where the cracks, if you can see down here, there were cracks radiating from here. There was cracks up here. This was a before image, and this was a during. So we put new stucco on it, and we put joints in to allow some movement, filled them with sealant, and recoated the outside of the building. So this was a before and a during and an after. So we try to maintain the original building, the original fabric. We try to deal with the structural issues as we work on them. This building does have Lexan overglazing over the stained glass windows. And this was the north facade before we got started. And then the last thing that we did a couple of years ago with A.D. Davis was put new wood shingles on the steeple that was there. This is a special house for a special friend of ours. It's on South St. George Street, and it's a 3-story house, residential house. This is the facade on St. George Street, and then their garden area. And then just one of the interior features of the stair, we left some of the finish off to expose the coquina block wall that was in the stair hall. We've done a number of projects for the Leitner Museum, City Hall. We re-roofed the whole building. And the spires that you see here, when I worked for Herschel in the late 1970s, we put the spires back on. We recently cleaned it a couple of years ago and addressed the cracks. And we've done interior work in the Leitner Museum. So when I was working for Herschel, we were working for Joe Pomar, I think was a city manager here. And I came down and talked to him about the spires. So they had taken the spires off because some of them had fell off or blown off in a storm. And so he had one of each type. There's a center spire that's bigger and 4 corner ones that's smaller. And he had them in a storage building in this wooden box with sawdust like they were in coffins. He was taking good care of them. And so we bid a project to have them replicated and reinstalled. The reason they failed to begin with is they had a mild steel rod in the center of the spires. And over the years, as they moved and fractured some and got moisture in there, the steel would rust and exfoliate, and so they would start breaking up, and some of them came off. So we put them back with stainless steel center rods, and we ran the lightning rod up the back with a new lightning rod on top. And so that's what, and so the project was bid. E.B. Mead was the low bidder, and Tommy White did the terracotta work in Jacksonville. And if any of you know Tommy White, he was quite a character. So we also have done projects for the Leitner Museum. This is one of the first projects I did, and it's the elevator lobby on the west side of the building, and we put a new elevator in just behind where I'm standing. But we put the marble floor in for Bob. After that, we ended up, this is the floor plan of the ballroom, grand ballroom level on the back of the Leitner. And it's this in the center, that's an opening that overlooks the pool, for those of you who might not be so familiar with it. And these are the semicircular ends that faced on, now I forget the names of this is Cordova Street over here, I think. And you come into the area through this center stair, and then this is the elevator that we added earlier. So this is the north wing before we did the restoration work and after the restoration work was done. So we repaired all of the stucco, all of the ornamental plaster. Some of these features were missing. Some of the plaster moldings were missing. This is the area that overlooks the pool. So the railings, the original railings there were too low to comply with the current building codes. So we raised them up by putting them on a higher base, wood base, to get the top rail up to the code required height. We put something like 40 tons of air conditioning into that area. And then we had a track lighting system up here on the ceiling for exhibits so that Bob could change the lighting to accentuate the exhibits. Bob Harper, the director there. This is the east wing. And so some of these ornamental brackets were missing. Some of the dentals and the moldings were missing. And they were all repaired and restored, and new pieces were fabricated by W.D. Brinson that did plaster work for us. He's since retired. So this is the semicircular end on the east end. This is a before, and so the capitol was missing. Some of the pieces were missing. That's the sprinkler system that was routed around through the opening. So all of the sprinkler system was concealed except for the heads. And then the lighting that's in there, Bob had in his archives, and he furnished those, and they were hung in the restored areas. This is a historic photo of the Alcazar Hotel lobby that was the forerunner of the City Hall Leitner Museum building. And it's in the area where the Leitner Museum entry is now. So we did a project about 2000 or so to restore, but the Leitner Museum had a narrow entry about 20 feet wide. And so they got the spaces on both sides of that entry to enlarge their lobby. And so the areas had been used for office space previous to that. So when the ceilings were removed, it had acoustical tile ceilings. So when the ceiling, this is a before and an after. When the acoustical tile ceilings were removed, the plaster was beat up and cut up, pieces were gone, and we had air conditioning lines routed through the ceiling. And so that's a before. This was the after. There was the space originally had a ceramic tile floor. There were pieces of it remaining in the area, and so we replicated the original floor with this polished stone floor that went back in the same pattern as the original floor was. This is the visitor center for the Jimenez Facio House, and we did this working with Leslie Keys, who was the director at the time. And this building started out as a one-story concrete block garage that was right here. And so we expanded it to have a sales area, and this on the first floor, an office space and meeting room on the second floor for the Colonial Dames. Tom McDonald was the contractor for that. So Grace United Methodist Church, we did a project around the late 1990s to restore the tower and to clean and repair the cracks in the concrete. And I think we re-roofed it at the time, but I can't remember that for sure. So when we got up to the tower, it had these clay tile shingles that have what looks like a nose on the tile shingle. So I'd never seen those before. They had re-roofed it about 20 years before, and they didn't have enough of the shingles to redo it like it had originally been. So they spaced them out and they changed the pattern of the shingles up there. So we had a photograph from a historic photograph of what it looked like, and one of the girls, and I forget her name, I think this was her, from the Flagler College Art Department, made us replica shingles that were used to go back up there so that we could put the number of courses in and the pattern of the tiles to match the original tower on the building. This is Brian Rand, who did the masonry restoration, and he's working on one of these terracotta spires here in the corner. But this is the area that we were in just a moment ago, and that's the restored shingles that are up there. So what we knew at the time was Old St. Augustine Village, our historic house museum, was the Dow complex that's down on south of here, and it's been sold, and I'm not sure, I think it's residential or... And so, but we worked on all 8 of the buildings and made them into house museums, and it wasn't quite as successful as they hoped, and so the property was eventually sold. But this was the, now I've forgotten the name of it. Pardon? Prince Murad House, that's right. So this is before we got started, and this during the restoration. So there was a large crack here that we repaired, and we stitched it up together. And this was the finished appearance, although it was more of the pink tone. My slide for somehow has turned it a little bit orangey here today. And the living room in that area, the plaster was all beaten up. When Kenneth Dow lived there, and we went through the buildings, there was like a maze. He was a collector, and so there was just enough room to walk between all of the stuff that he had stored in there. And I couldn't find an image of that to share with you, but he had plenty of things in there that put them to good use. This is the Pena Peck House. We did some work for the Women's Exchange and worked with Margot Pope and Marjorie Rainier. We did, and they had a state grant, as I recall, to do restoration on it. So we restored the siding, the stucco. We added this rail that was similar to a historic rail, trying to keep people from putting their feet on the building to marking it up. We did some additions on the kitchen area in the back. We put a new metal roof on the building, lighting. This was the rear of the building and the main living room area. We did a color analysis there at that time as well, and we only found a little bit of original paint near one of the stairs. So they used that pretty much as a guide for repainting the rest of the house. The wood floors were the original wood floors. The heart pine wood floors were restored as well. So this is St. Cyprian's Church that we did some work on. So this was original, I think it was built in early 1900s. And so this was what the original church looked like. Shortly after we got started, A.D. Davis was doing this work. They had what dormers appeared to be fake dormers on there. There was no glass in them and no evidence on the interior that they ever dropped light onto the inside. But they were there, and we put them back on, and we put a accessible handicap entrance ramp in this area. And basically, besides that, we restored the building and put it back to where it looked like on the original construction. In the early 1990s, we got started working on restoration of the lighthouse, and they had a small state grant. I was fortunate to be selected to do the lighthouse restoration. This was about the third or fourth phase, and where we did major work on the tower. So this was the scaffolding that went all the way to the top. Was about over $100,000 worth of scaffolding. And so the windows, the brick, this is painted brick, is the exterior of the building. It was interesting, the black areas, the black painted areas had some areas that were cupped out, like you'd taken a spoon and cupped out the brick. And mostly it was near the edges, and we think that when the Coast Guard, over the years as they'd maintained it, they may have sandblasted it, and it kind of cupped that brick out, and so we filled that. These photos were taken in the 1990s before we had drones. So the guy that did them had a balloon. So he had a balloon on a tether that he could control his camera up in the air with, and managed to get it right at the sort of the gallery focal plane up there. It was Sky Shots was the name of the company. So this was the oil storage building before we got started. The Coast Guard had taken the windows out and the shutters off, and they had a emergency generator on this room over here on the right. But they had put a new metal roof on the building, so we had lead paint, and all the paint was removed, and the building was restored. We replicated the windows based on the original drawings, and the shutters on the original drawings. And the paint colors were documented and repainted. This is Cullen Chambers, who was the director there at that time, and Cullen was great to work with. One of the phases, our contractor wasn't doing the type of work we expected, and Cullen would work with him every day to try to improve the quality of the work we were getting on this area of the lantern room area at the top. He moved on from here to Tybee Lighthouse to restore the Tybee Lighthouse up there, and Kathy Fleming took over. And so when Cullen was there, he had a staff of like 5 people. And so today they may have over 100 people out there. It's just amazing how that's grown. We started work for the Flagler College with a project in the gym to redo the locker rooms, and then shortly after that, they had acquired the Chris Ellert House and Gallery. So this was the existing gallery that they had, and we added this new museum gallery over on the over here is their student center. So it's next to their student center. So we added on this existing building, we added this tower and this entrance into the art museum. And this is the art museum that we put on there. It's got clay tile floor and vaulted ceilings. The rear of the building from the Markland House entrance, and then this area was created into a courtyard, and that's the back of their original gallery that was there. These are the FEC buildings. When Flagler acquired them, we were retained to convert them into dormitories. So basically the exterior of the buildings were unchanged by the work that we did, although these windows in the center of the 3 buildings were enlarged and made into doorways so that we could have exit doors from a fire stair that were added at the center of the end of each of the east end of each of the buildings. The lobbies that were on the west side were retained generally as they were without any changes, although there were some steps, floor steps in the lobby, so we had to add small ramps there. But the finishes were generally retained. We did change the windows and the doors. And then this was the student corridor in the center of the floor with the student rooms on each side. The courtyards were designed by Sharon Fowler. And between the 2 courtyards between the 3 buildings, it's a great place for the students to gather and spend time. This is an admissions building that we designed on Cordova Street for the college. It replaced a small building that was there. It was an infill construction. And the lobby at the admissions building. This was one of our more interesting projects. This was at the corner of Kuna Street and Cordova Street, and this was the communications building that was built, I think, in the 1950s. And so it was torn down, and we built this building complex that looks like 3 buildings, but they're all kind of tied together as one to get the space that the college needed for their new classroom building in that area. This is part of the building that's on Kuna Street. And this is the main lobby, and it had a little nook for the students back here to spend quiet time in. The courtyard was again designed by Sharon Fowler. And then a couple of years ago, this was the Chris Ellert House that the college calls the Anderson Cottage. It was built, I think, in the late 1800s, perhaps. Leslie will know for sure. 1870, and about 1920s, 30s, was moved to this site, and it was renovated to be a Mediterranean revival type of structure. So basically, we renovated this for their visitor center and alumni house and a visitors alumni house. And so the exterior was generally restored, although we put a new awning over the terrace so that protect from the sun, to use that as a gathering space on the exterior. This was one of the spaces, one of the offices on the inside was, I think, the old dining room with the wood wainscoting and this rear stair. This is the main entry foyer and the entry stair and some of the historic cabinets that were in the building that were restored. Then we've done a number of projects on the old Ponce de Leon Hotel, with the exterior restoration. We restored the towers. We've restored renovated almost all of the dorm rooms. And then one of the projects we did here was this floor, the top floor, the main part of the building was a solarium, and it was unused. It had been used a little bit for a library at one point over the years, but they only had one exit stair from that area, and so I think they discontinued use of it because it didn't have enough exits. And so we were retained, and this is the floor plan of it. That window is the window that overlooks the courtyard. This is the main solarium area. You come up there through this stair that's right outside here, or this elevator, and then we have a conference room over here, and toilets, and a serving kitchen over here, and some chair storage. These are roof terraces at each side, and then these are the two towers. So the towers have exit stairs in them, and originally they had these wood exit stairs from the terrace into the tower, so we rebuilt those and renovated the building, or the area, by A.D. Davis was the general contractor for it. This is during restoration photos of the main solarium area. The floor had to be reinforced. We found some structural problems in it, and so we repaired that. The plaster, all of the finishes were restored. We thought the space was going to be used for board meetings, and so we added some supplemental lighting. But these were the original lights that were up there that were restored. The carpet and the finishes were done by Susan Goddard, who worked with us and was a graduate of the college. And this was a sliding wood and glass door that overlooked the windows to the courtyard. It was original to the space. One of the hurricanes about 10 years ago or so blew part of it out. And so that was restored with a state grant by Tom McDonald. He did a beautiful job. The panels roll, you touch them and they just roll out of the way. This is the west roof terrace. So early photo of it being in use when it was a hotel. This is what it looked like before we got started. It had a modified bitumen roofing up here, the clay tile roof. And so this is after we got finished. We had a new concrete paver system to walk on. The building is generally restored. The chimneys were cleaned and repointed. This is the east terrace. So you can stand back here and see the inlet. You can see the bridge. You can have a beautiful vista of the downtown area. For social gatherings, they put bars out on these terraces, and it's a great place to visit and to spend time. The wood stairs that we recreated were similar to the stair that was there originally, and then the tower areas were restored. We had done another project with Davis to restore the towers, and there's some of the balusters, the terracotta balusters were broken and missing and were replaced, and the terracotta and brickwork were cleaned and repaired. That's the scaffolding in place for it. As part of the exterior restoration work, these coquina walls around the fountain in the courtyard were deteriorated, and some of the coquina stone was missing, so that the void areas were cut out. They were all repointed and repaired and put back in a good condition. Some of the work on the exterior restoration work was done by International Fine Arts Conservators Studios of Atlanta. Jeff Stewart ran the company. This was Mary that worked for him, and she was one of his greatest craftsmen. So these are some of the windows on the, I think, on the towers on the front, so that you can see that the tile, the ceramic tile, was missing and fallen out, and the wood trim was in bad shape. So they replicated the tiles and put them all back into good condition and repaired and restored the wood windows and overglazing. And then this is one of the rear corners on the north side of the building. So we had vertical cracks in the brickwork back there. So these are ports where we pumped in epoxy to repair the cracks. And then the tape, I think that's tape on there, held epoxy in until it dried, and then all those were taken off, and you can't see any evidence of the repairs. The International Fine Arts Conservators these were the wood windows on the first through the third floors that were stripped and restored, and so during restoration and an after. The lights that are in the loggias, I think they were iron, and many of them these were the original ones that were taken down. They were repaired and restored by Alex Klom, who does metal restoration work for us. And so there they are, that rehung. The missing ones, he fabricated new ones to match the historic lights to put those back up. The courtyard entrance, this is Mary again. They were all stripped and refinished and repaired, and there was terracotta work was done around here. The tile was repaired. These windows were stripped and refinished. The exterior of the dining room had been repaired and restored by Tom McDonald. It has Lexan overglazing over the stained glass windows and to protect them. And so we're quite proud of this building and the work that we've done here. This is Memorial Presbyterian Church that we're working on these days, and this was a view of it around 1900. When we got started, the hurricane that came through a couple of years ago blew their cross off on the dome, and it fell over and was laying on the ladder that went up the backside of the dome. And I think it's a total of 21, or I forget how tall it is, 15, 20 feet tall, and it's made out of bronze. And so this was when the cross was being taken down. We had to take it down with a crane. Richard Hardy did that work for him. And this was the cross down on the ground. So it went from here back down into here. And this was the copper ball that was at the base of the cross up here. So when we got the cross off, the opening where it was mounted had a slight dished area, and it had bitumen sealant in it, but it had leaked and it had deteriorated the wood framing below it. So the copper dome, we stripped back the copper one width and repaired the deteriorated wood framing and the ribs. And this is the repaired dome area. And then this is after the new cross was, or the repaired cross was reinstalled, and the copper is back on the ribs down here below. This is waterproofing that was put over the center area, and then we had a copper shroud that went on after that to enclose that. This is the repaired cross from here up to there, as it was being lifted to go back onto the dome of the church. And there it's being placed. So the day that it was put back up, we had no wind. It was a good day, but there was no sun, and so it was all cloudy and overcast. So that was my photo that day. So we've been doing restoration work over there. This area is generally complete on the east side, except the lanterns here. These are the lanterns that were here are being restored and being repaired or replaced. We had some cracks in the coquina concrete that have been repaired. The overglazing over the stained glass window has been repaired. This tower has been restored, and at the moment, the main tower has been finished. They're taking the scaffolding down. We've got new lighting on the dome and the tower area, and so the work is generally done from here around to the back, and so we're getting ready to start on the south side later this month or early next month. And that's Ponce Hall again, and that's the end of my my slideshow. So, well, thank you all for coming. For cold night. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I think I got a little bit hoarse up here talking, so. Nice to see you all. Thank you very much.